All right. So what we're going to look at this week and a little bit next week. Why are you smiling so much, Adriel? The Industrial Revolution is cool, but
Actually, um, um, some of my other friends, like Lauren, who doesn't have her camera on, we wanted to show you a little something.
okay. Should I pause the recording, or do you want the rest of the class to see
No,
it?
I think that it should be on the recording.
I love it. Okay.
Okay, hit it, guys. We made little signs in honor of Kindness Week. Mine says "I love Tuttle." If everyone else wants to read theirs,
I can read yours, and yours is the best one, Adriel.
Mine says "thank you," and the other one says "you rock," but my camera won't turn on.
Okay. And Luke is fast on the uptake. Well, you guys are welcome. I'm really bummed that we'd know each other a lot better if things were different. So come visit me a lot next year and complain about Cordic. So, all right. Well, that was sweet. Now I'm choked up. And I appreciate you guys too. I really do. And get your camera fixed, Lauren. Okay, so what we're going to talk about has more impact on your daily life than anything else we're going to talk about this whole year, right? Look around you, okay? Look around your rooms. Look at your laptop. Look at your clothing, your shoes, your furnishings. Look how much stuff we all have, all right? Now ask yourself, how much of this stuff did I make myself, okay? For me, the answer is nothing within arm's reach, okay? Maybe just some lame crafts from 4th grade or something. This is all a result of the Industrial Revolution. All of these goods are made for us, right? We don't have to make our own stuff. Imagine if you had to make your own clothes, grow your own food, build your own shelter, all of that, all right? Your standard of living would drop precipitously, all right? And we owe all this to the agricultural and industrial revolutions. So that's what I'm going to talk about now, probably for a while. So buckle up. And we're going to go over here, and we'll use the invaluable Susan Poger's notes. And why won't that go away? There we go. Okay. So we're going to start in kind of a strange way, and that's sort of, why didn't the Industrial Revolution start in France? France has all of these advantages, okay? First of all, it's the biggest, most populous, richest country for most of the European history we've studied, but it doesn't start there. And then they do have all these advantages, right? After Napoleon, they have the Napoleonic Code, so they have a unified legal code. And where the Napoleonic Code doesn't cover, they have solid traditional communal laws in which people can freely enter into contracts. This is vitally important for capitalism, right? There's open markets. There's uniform, clear, and commercial regulations going all the way back to, does anybody remember? Colbert, right? One thing the French Revolution came up with that was a good idea was the metric system. All right, so they have a standardized weights and measures, which facilitates trade. They have, remember the lycée, right? Those expand, and we have all sorts of schools, not just for government service, but for technical jobs as well. And the government is going to encourage and honor entrepreneurship and pioneering inventions. And they have the Bank of France, which will give them a reliable currency and allow the government to do what's called monetary policy. But it doesn't happen in France. Why? You don't know that you know, but you already know why. Right? They were at war from 1789 to 1815. The wars were fought there. Okay? They bankrupted themselves supporting the American Revolution, their own revolution, the whole failed experiment with assignats, right? The continuing warfare, crushing debt, right? Inability to reabsorb soldiers into the peacetime economy, right? And essentially, this whole generation of French people have been deeply traumatized. Okay, if you see, it doesn't have to be you; it could be your parents or your wife's parents or your neighbor. If you see people build stuff up and it's completely wiped out, you're afraid to take risks. Okay, you're not going to bet on the future if you're not optimistic about it. And all these years of turmoil and the terror and Napoleon and all that, they've really shaken the confidence of the French people, which I hate to tell you, they're never going to get back. And so the revolution's not going to happen there. Plus, they don't get that stuff until after 1815. All right, it's going to happen much sooner someplace else, which I would imagine you know, and that is Britain or England. Okay, the Industrial Revolution begins in Britain. The workshop of the world and other cliches. All right. And Bonaparte dismissed it as a nation of shopkeepers, but he was right. Right. One of the things, and there are some other notes, quick notes that you can just go through on your own. Underneath this, they're my notes, so they're really short compared to Susan Poger's. On the agricultural revolution, there would not be a revolution in production of goods in industry if there wasn't before that a revolution in the production of food. Okay? And the main point that the other notes get across is if you have more food, you have more what? More people. All right? And people do two things. All right? You'll learn about this from Coach Whitcomb. All right? They provide an economic good or service, and they consume economic goods and services. And so when you have more people, you have more providers and more consumers. And that leads to economic expansion if there's a system that can absorb all of that energy. Now remember, during the Black Death, things got better for the people who survived because their ancient system of doing things couldn't handle all the people that there were, and that sharp contraction in the amount of living people made things better for everybody else because they had grown to the limits of the feudal system. While the industrial system combined with capitalism is going to be able to absorb all of these new people. And we're going to see great population growth at this time and people being fed in new ways. So here's the enclosure movement, and that's really, I think, all she's going to talk about. But basically, in the 18th century, and actually late 17th century as well, wealthy British landlords, okay, I hope you're not shocked, they controlled Parliament. And they decided they wanted to change the way they were farming. Under the feudal system, the ancient system, remember, it was a two-way street. The noble and the peasant both had duties and responsibilities to each other. And essentially, the community had to agree on what to grow, what kind of crops, things like that. And the peasants are very conservative, okay? And generally, we think of farmers and people in agriculture as conservative because the stakes are really high. If you try something new, you could bankrupt your farm, or in the terms of early modern Europe, you could starve to death. And so they weren't very keen on trying new things. And these landlords, though, especially, they started seeing things happening in the Low Countries, in Holland, and they want to try new crops and they want to enrich themselves. So they pass a bunch of legislation called the Enclosure Acts through Parliament, which allows them, as you can see here, to wall off their lands and to kick the peasants off, right? And this has a few effects that in the other notes I'll talk about it, but essentially it displaces a huge source of labor, right? These peasants are no longer tied to the farms that they were born on, and they need something to do. And when they can experiment with new crops, they're going to greatly increase food production. And that's going to be able to feed a growing population. And then ultimately, the landlords aren't going to, hoe the fields themselves. So they're going to hire peasants back for what? Wages. We're going to switch from a feudal economy of communal cooperation to a wage-based economy, which is what modern economics is, right? That's how our system works. You work for a wage, not because of some ancient contracts you signed to your landlord or the manager of Jersey Mike's, right? It's a wage-based system. Now, England, essentially, there's two categories of reasons why England dominated. And the first one we all like, they just got lucky. Okay, they're an island. They're separated from the wars of Europe, and their island is just chock full of things you need to industrialize, like iron and coal deposits and navigable waterways, right, which then can be connected with canals. Right? Canals are the early substitute for railroads. Right? If you need to move a lot of stuff that's really heavy, wagons aren't going to do it. You're going to have to float it on barges. And so the industrial heart of Britain, you can see here, is interconnected by all of these canals that then connect the rivers that then connect to the ports. And here are some early canals, right? And they're still there today. Okay, and going along the canal, you push it with a pole. That's known as punting, right? And it's sort of considered like a common, like everyday type of non-expert type thing to do. So when people walk into a pub or something and you don't know them, like, who are these punters? And that's, you'll hear that if you watch British crime movies a lot, right? So here they are, and here is a lock in a canal, right? That's how you change elevations. These are really cool. You can go through these in the Erie Canal up in New York, or the Main Canal if you travel through Europe, or the biggest, most famous ones, of course, are in Panama and Suez. But essentially, that's how you move water up and over large hills, is through locks, where you shut it off, fill it with water, and then raise the boat up and then let it go, or you can do the reverse. Okay. Definitely in the luck category, all right, is that they are able to convert a lot of things to coal. Essentially, I'll talk more about this with the steam engine, but they're able to use coal to boil water to make steam to drive things. And they're also able to use coal to make metal really, really hot and make it into stronger metal. All right. And initially, they're able to smelt, funny word, iron, and they replace wooden tools with iron. Okay, the iron plow can dig much deeper in the dirt with the same horsepower pulling it, and can give more crops. Iron tools last longer. Okay? And so we get coal replacing water power, iron replacing wood, right? And then we're going to get an alloy of iron called steel. And steel, and those of you that are in, I mean, you can be into any kind of hobby, but especially like bicycles, dirt bikes, off-road parts, you want light, strong metal, okay? And that's always what you're looking for, whether it's titanium or, you know, tungsten or some strange alloy, molybdenum. You want to get light metal that's strong, and steel is lighter and stronger than iron, right? And it's going to be essentially what the second half of the Industrial Revolution is built out of, all right? Puddling was basically what you have to do is you have to heat up iron ore. So you need thousands, and you have to use coal and air to get a fire that's thousands of degrees. And then you scrape off the impurities out of the ore, and you're left with the iron ingot, right? And then essentially they discover the way to take iron and get all of the carbon out of it and turn it into steel is to just push oxygen through it. All right, the carbon bonds with the oxygen and burns off, and you are left with steel. So that's called hot blast. And then ultimately, Henry Bessemer creates it on a huge scale, and that's when we're going to get the amount of steel we're going to need to build railroads all over Europe, all over the US, to build skyscrapers, that type of stuff. The Bessemer process is going to produce cheap, strong steel. And so there you see, look, they have what they need where they need it, all right? And look at the population growth. London is still the biggest city in the world, all right? But in these industrial areas now, and those of you that follow Premier League and stuff, you know these cities, right? Leeds, Manchester, Sheffield, okay, Liverpool, Birmingham, okay? Most of these cities grow as a result of the Industrial Revolution. And if you look at the turn of the 19th century, there's about 50,000 miners being employed. By the end, there's 1.2 million miners being employed. Okay. And so their coal consumption increases rapidly, but their coal deposits are able to keep up with it. Right? And children make great coal miners. Poja has this here. These are actually American children in an American coal mine in Pennsylvania, but children were extensively used in British coal mines as well. And also we'll see they're used in factories because they're small, all right? And because they're small, they can get into really thin, small veins of coal and crawl up in there, and they drag sledges or wagons on their back. They're called hurriers, and they go into the small spaces to bring the coal out. And of course, it's completely dark. They're way underground, all right? Very deadly profession. And as you'll see, children make about 1/10 of what adults make. So people like to hire them, right? They're cheap labor. And there's no shortage of them. So there's plenty of child labor supply. It's cheap. We're going to use it. And essentially, pig iron, okay, or this is just base level iron. By 1870, we're doing 4 million tons a year, just in Britain. And so this iron and this transportation system, all of this is going to give us what's going to be called the factory system, all right? And there's a series of inventors. This is where Britain, it's not luck, it's the way they organize their society. People in Britain have confidence in their society, right? They haven't had major political upheaval since 1688. All right, that whole 18th century that was chaos for everybody else, in Britain, it wasn't. And so people trust their government. They will invest in their economy because they believe it's going to continue to do well. And so we get entrepreneurs, okay? An entrepreneur is someone who brings together all of what are called the factors of production and makes something, makes a business, okay? Makes an invention. Valley Center, many of your parents are entrepreneurs, right? If they started their own business, whether they're ranchers or farmers or tax preparers, assessors, you know, if they started their own business and they brought together everything they need for that business, then they're an entrepreneur. Okay? So here you have, and the main industry that's going to be created first is textiles. Okay, think of basic human needs. What's the first one we took care of? Food. Because of the agricultural revolution, and do go look at those other notes. There's enough food for people to eat. What's the next major need? Clothing and textiles. There we go. That works better. Textiles are the basic material of clothing. Right now, it wasn't until very recently, you know, within the last 130 years or so, that you could go to the store and buy a shirt or a pair of pants. You had to go to the store and buy the fabric, and then either you had to have the skill yourself or you had to hire someone to make your clothes. So clothes were still custom made. All right, but the amount of textiles is going to increase greatly because of these machines. And there's 2 steps essentially to making textiles, and that's spinning, or making the yarn, the individual fibers, threads, and then weaving, putting them together to make the fabric itself. Okay? And when someone invents a machine that speeds up one, it doesn't really help that much until someone invents a machine that speeds up the other. Okay, so here we have the water frame, which is a water-powered spinning machine, which is going to make yarn fast. Okay. And I guess we'll get to the others later. But what Arkwright does is he essentially says, let's take everything we need and put it in one place. And this is not how businesses really run now, but essentially, let's get the labor, let's get the people there, let's get the raw materials there, let's get the means of production there, and a way to ship it out. And that's the factory system, okay? So we're going to get places like Manchester and Leeds, etc., where there's going to be lots of people concentrated where things are going to be made. All right? And it's going to be, initially, it's going to have to be near a power source. All right, so if you run, you know, like a water frame, things like that, you have to be near a stream or a river to run the power. You need capital investment, and this is where Britain is doing well, right? They have a wealthy middle class that has extra money to invest, and they're willing to invest in the future. The mid-19th century, only about 10% of British industry was technically factory industry. More of it was what's called the putting out system or the cottage system. And that was you had these farmer peasant families who needed extra income, and so the merchant would take a load of raw cotton, raw wool, etc., and he'd take it to, and we'll simplify this, he'd take it to one farmhouse, and they would spin it into yarn. And well, they'd actually take it to another place first, and they would dye it into different colors. Then they would spin it, then he'd pick it up, pay them for however much they did, take it to the next house where they would weave it together into fabric, and then pay them, pick it up, take it and sell it, and just keep reinvesting his profits in expanding this. But ultimately, the machines are going to get too big to fit literally in peasant cottages. And so then people like Arkwright build the machines their own cottages, which we call factories. And so you can see the growth there. This is textiles, right? Over 1 million workers by 1850. So if only 10%, so that's only 100,000 people in factories. The rest are doing the cottage industry, right? But still, it's a huge amount of production. And one of the first things that becomes affordable as a result of the Industrial Revolution is textiles and clothing. If something has to be custom made, it takes a long time and it costs a lot, right? Think of a Ferrari versus a Ford. Ford makes more cars every day than Ferrari has ever made, period. Why? Because Ferraris are hand-built, okay? That's why they're so expensive. Fords are made by robots, okay? Thousands and thousands and thousands every day. So that's where you get, custom-made things are more expensive. So before the textile industry was revolutionized, most people, common people like us, you had one set of clothes and you'd wear it until it just rotted off your back, okay? And only the rich wore underwear. No one else could afford to spend money on clothes that you wear under your clothes, okay? That seems ridiculous. But now, thanks to the Industrial Revolution, all of us who choose to can afford underwear, right? There's a factory picture. I really think, now that's probably Manchester, okay? But you see the smoke. Remember we talked about Joseph M.W. Turner and how he liked the smoke and what it did to light, right? So here you see coal fire belching smoke into the skies, right? And the main thing, if you get everybody in one spot, you try as much as possible to control how they work. So you have a rigid schedule. The people work 12 to 14 hours a day. There's dangerous conditions. Okay? There's no workplace safety laws. There's nothing like what we can now call OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Right? And the jobs are really boring. Now here's the thing. The more skill you can take out of a job, the less you have to pay someone to do it, because the more people there are who can do it. So you're inventing these machines and investing a lot in these machines that require very little input from the operator, all right? You want it to be as simple as possible. And simple means repetitive and boring, right? And this is an idealized version. This would have appeared in the London Times as great industrialization. And this whole room, I don't know if you can see on your little sub presentation screen, but they're spinning. They're making spindle after spindle after spindle of yarn for clothes on all of these machines. They commemorate them in coins. The Bobbindoffers, these are kids, okay? And again, kids are valuable because if something gets jammed up inside these machines, those are small spaces where only children and children's limbs can reach. And so the children are needed to work in and around the machines. And as I said, they're plentiful. So oftentimes children that are maimed or killed in industrial accidents are not difficult to replace. So they are used quite a bit to feed these machines. Here's a loom. Okay, the loom is the thing that does the weaving, that puts the threads together to make the fabric. All right. So John K's flying shuttle. This is a weaving device that quickly allowed a person to throw the yarn back and forth on this little wooden thing that's on a wire, and you could throw the yarn that way, operate the loom, throw it back, and you could do it much faster. All right. And then, of course, that was human powered. Then we're going to get the power loom, which is the same thing as the flying shuttle, but now it's got an external power source. First water and then steam. All right. And then the main component of the first industrial revolution is the steam engine. All right now, and the steam engine is revolutionary because if you think of it, before a steam engine, all work, all right, had to be done either by nature in the form of wind, okay, or water power, okay, the things we're trying to bring back now, or it had to be done by people and animals. So all work had to be done, at least all predictable, reliable work had to be done by things that eat food. Okay, so food powered everything. Well, steam engines don't eat food, they eat coal. And so now you can feed steam engines and you can have as many as you want because you got a ton of coal. And another good thing about steam engines is they don't need to sleep. You don't have to pay them. They don't want better conditions. They don't call in sick. Okay, they break down and you maintain them. But essentially now we have a labor device that doesn't get tired. And so factories operate 24 hours a day, right? And you can also build them anywhere because now you can build a steam engine anywhere. And so that's when places like Manchester are going to get really big because you're going to buy cheap land that's easily accessible because you don't need to be near a port or a river, okay? Because the steam engine is going to power things. And so once we get, and he's not the inventor of the steam engine, a guy named Thomas Newcomen came up with the steam engine first, but Watt's design is much more efficient and scalable. That's a popular word these days. In other words, you can take Watt's basic design and make a little steam engine to power something, all right? Or you can take a steam engine that can power a tractor or a ship, okay? Here's Matthew Bolton. We're putting steam paddle wheels on ships now, which means you can go upstream without having to row, right? Of course, most famous is the steam locomotive. And the steam locomotive, which pulls a train of cars, is going to replace the river as the thing that can haul huge amounts of really heavy stuff. And they will later turn into Thomas, right? And then the tank engines will fight the diesels and all of that, which I'm sure was some of your youth, as was my son's. All right, but look at these travel times. 18, and this is just 14 years. Okay, this is less than your lifespan. They used to take 43 hours to get from Edinburgh in Scotland to London. All right, that cuts it down to 12 and a half. To get from Birmingham, 3 hours. And on a railroad, that can be people, that can be tons of coal, tons of iron ore, it can be supplies. Everything is moving that fast. And so now we have fast, reliable transportation on this network, and we're going to move these production factors around. Okay? But then again, some people, they're not as enthusiastic as Turner was about the railroad, and they see essentially railroad companies, and this is even more pronounced in the US, they acquire huge amounts of land and they carve corridors through the countryside for these railroads that are not always popular. The Crystal Palace is essentially like the first World's Fair, where they build this giant building out of this iron and steel superstructure, and the steel is light enough that they can build essentially a huge building completely out of glass. I mean, the whole thing is windows. Think back to Romanesque architecture from the first weeks of school. Now the entire building can be a window, right? And so this is where they have basically a celebration of all man's technological achievements. And it's open for a year, and it's very popular, and all the people who can go and visit it, and then you go inside, all right? And there's all these exhibitions, and there's exhibitions of art and culture, but also the most popular ones are of technology, right? New machinery, new devices, new products, things like that. And then they build factories, very nice, clean factories that people can tour to see what Britain is able to produce industrially. And we had a pavilion, okay? And again, this is the first like World's Fair. We don't have those anymore. But up until the 60s, it was like kind of like the Olympics. Cities would host a World's Fair, and all the nations would bring their coolest stuff for everybody to marvel at. So I'm going to quickly talk about this, and then we're going to look more at what disparities are brought about and the response to those on Thursday when we're all together. All right. So we've talked about bourgeoisie, right? It's in English and German, it's Bürger. In French, it's bourgeoisie. We call it middle class. All right. The Industrial Revolution is going to take the middle class and propel them to be in control, essentially, of most of society. Right. They'll still call themselves middle class, but they will be running the nations. Right? Sometimes with some help from the nobility, but often not. Right? And these people have money, and they have now access to cheaper goods. So they really start to live a very luxurious lifestyle with lots of clothes, custom-made furniture, cool things in their homes. Right. Of course, there's criticism of the extravagance of the bourgeoisie, not as extravagant as like Marie Antoinette, etc., but they are criticized for being materialistic. And factory owners are criticized for being greedy and heartless. And then I'll leave you with this, because we'll talk about the impact of it on Thursday. The wealth gap. Okay, the rich are getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer. Right. Before industrialization, there wasn't too much material difference between the poor and the wealthy, except the amount of food that you had. As society is able to produce more and more, and for the first time now we have lots of surplus, lots of extra stuff, some people's pile of extra stuff gets huge and other people's doesn't. All right? And that's still an issue today, right? You have Bernie still talking about the wealth gap. All right? Elon Musk is now today worth over $200 billion. All right? That's a huge gap between him and all the rest of us. And some people say that's inherently a problem. Some people say it's not. So there's lots of issues involved with that. But it first comes about as a result of the Industrial Revolution, right? Most of human history, you were born, you're rich because your parents were rich. You were born into nobility, right? Now we have classes that see an ability to move up themselves. And that's going to destabilize things and lead to lots of problems. All right, let me make sure I want to stop there. Yes, that's a very Marxian term. We're going to talk about Marx on Thursday. Okay, so that's an overview of the Industrial Revolution.